Hello and welcome to American Friction, your best friend and your favourite podcast, all rolled into one. And I'm your best friend and host, Jacob Jarvis.
And I'm, according to the script, just a casual acquaintance, Chris Jones.
And joining us today is someone who's not just a pal, she feels a bit more like family. It's Nikki McCann Ramirez. Hi, sis.
Oi, bruvs.
So on this show, Trump gave the first big speech of his presidency. How utterly unhinged was it on a scale of 1 to infinity? We pick apart what the president had to say and get into the fallout of his all-out trade war, which looks like it's tanking the American economy too. But before that, Chris, it's that time of the week. Let's get silly. Give a silly question then.
It's award season, isn't it?
It is.
It's award season. People they're winning awards left, right, and bloody centre.
They are.
Aren't they?
Yeah, not us.
Not us, actually.
Yeah.
But now is our chance, because
Okay.
I thought I'd ask both of you to give us all some awards on this podcast. If you were to give us all some awards, what would you give?
Okay.
I'll start with you, Jarv.
So I've worked this out. So Chris, you're getting Top Scranner of the Year award.
I've got a sausage roll in the fridge as well. I've already had my lunch.
I'm jealous of that. Yeah, I'm always envious of your scran.
Yeah.
Because you've always got a good sort of combination of food. Scran is food, by the way, Nikki, if the slang doesn't translate. And whereas I just always have something like just a salad
Bowl
or something
of
really
chicken.
plain. Yeah, exactly. Just something really, really uber basic. Whereas you're a little bit more extravagant than me, and I
had two
admire it.
types of couscous for my lunch today. It's because we had giant couscous left over, but not enough to make enough for lunch.
Okay.
So I did some normal tiny couscous.
Okay.
Mixed it together with some chickpeas.
Couscous is what you had
yeah.
for lunch. And then for Nikki, I've got an award, which is British Ally of the Year award.
Oh,
because
God.
just the way that she's dedicated to sort of making mine and Chris's reputation across the pond much better. It's just really admirable, and I appreciate it, because Americans can be down on England, but the way I think about it, that was all a long time ago, guys, you know? And look what we've given you now. Princess Diana, Harry, Meghan, they all like that stuff.
Oh.
They like Will as well, so we've done all of that.
For some reason, when you said Harry, my immediate thought went to Harry Hill.
Harry Hill, yeah. Nikki
won't get that reference. Bit of TV burp, stick it on.
I absolutely love that. Harry Hill is so over the head. Nikki, what awards are you giving me and Chris then?
I'm just gonna say my Irish ancestors are probably rolling in their grave at that accolade.
Oh, let them roll.
How very British of you.
Yeah.
For Jarv, I was gonna say best worst impressions I've ever heard.
Thank you.
And for Chris, I think I was gonna go with most aggrieved. I think Chris is just constant.
What does it mean?
If I were to do a Chris impression, obviously my impressions are bad, but it'd be like, oh.
It means this. It means you put up with this a lot.
Yeah.
With all due respect, Nikki, you got no idea what it's like to be the #1 Tony Soprano impersonator in the whole of East London.
No, people who listen to this podcast probably would have heard him do that twice.
With all due
But
respect,
in the office, it is almost every single day. Every day he does a Sopranos impression. It is unbearable. And I am aggrieved, actually. That makes total sense now.
I'm telling you, look, I thought about it and I was like, is that mean? And I was like, no, I think it fits.
I think it fits.
There was about half a day at one point where I had a really good Hannibal Lecter down. I won't try it again now, but I nailed it for an hour or so. And it was really good. Chris, what are your awards?
Mine for Nikki was best non-crazy cat mum.
Okay.
Or non-crazy cat lady.
I like that, yeah.
It's true.
You know, I thought that was nice. Mine for you is best podcaster with first names as a full name.
Okay, the most first names.
The most first names as a full name. It's ridiculous. It's three first names, but it's a full name. Jacob Dylan Jarvis.
Yeah, They just wanted to keep giving me them. I know.
They would have given you 4 or 5 if we hadn't stopped them.
My mum attempted to give me 23.
23?
My dad just went, it's too many.
That's too many.
One for every chromosome.
Listeners, we would love to give you the award of best listeners in the world ever. Aw.
That's
And
right.
give us some awards as well. Let us know in the comments what awards you're giving all of us.
That's right. Well, I'm glad we've cleared all of that up.
Exactly.
This is American Friction, and you are listening.
Before we begin, a reminder that we are on Patreon and we need your direct support to keep the show going. For £3 a month, you'll get the show ad-free, and other tiers get you access to bonus content and even merchandise.
Isn't that brilliant? And if you sign up for £5 a month or more, we have a Patreon chat community where you can speak to us and each other directly to talk through the madness going on in US politics, and we'll give you a sneak peek behind the scenes when it comes to what we're thinking of discussing each week on the show as well.
We will indeed. So follow the link in the show notes or go to patreon.com/American Friction to sign up. Onto the show, Donald Trump gave his first address to Congress this week, the first major speech of his presidency. Nikki, one sentence then, sum up what he had to say. It can't be done.
I mean, it's really hard to distill 100 minutes into one sentence.
It was fucking long.
109 minutes.
109? Oh,
Quick
God.
maths from me there.
Yeah.
Christ.
Man's not hot.
Yeah, it was probably that. Man's not hot. I hate the term gaslighting, but if I had to just distill it into one sentence, it was an opportunity for Trump to, make the two parties sit down in front of him and paint an unrealistic picture of a golden age that does not exist during a time when the Trump administration and the federal government are actively fucking up thousands and thousands and thousands of people's lives. I think that's one sentence.
Yeah, just about. There's a few clauses in there, but I'll give you
a couple of semicolons, maybe a comma or two.
So what were the standout moments, Nikki?
I think the protests were notable. Al Green, who was the representative from Texas, the Democratic representative from Texas, he stood up in the middle of the aisle. I mean, if you've ever heard the phrase across the aisle to describe U.S. politics, it's because literally the House chamber, there's an aisle down the middle and people typically sit on their own side. So he stands in the aisle and he's yelling at Trump, and he's 77 years old. So he has a cane and he's pointing his cane at Trump and shaking it at him.
With a golden handle as well.
Yeah. Saying you have no mandate to cut Medicaid. You saying other things to him. Republicans tried to shout over him. Then it turned into a competition between Democrats and Republicans to like the hooligan section at your football games where the respective teams' hooligan sections just yell at each other.
Yeah. Soccer.
Yeah, that. It was kind of that for a couple minutes. And then Mike Johnson kept telling Representative Green to sit down. He wouldn't do it. He kept protesting. So they had him kicked out of the chamber by the sergeant at arms. And I believe they voted to censure him today.
What does that mean practically to censure him? Does that just sort of mean he can't do his job? What's the deal with that?
No. It's basically a written reprimand that is approved by the House or the Senate, whatever chamber you're in.
So it doesn't really mean anything.
It's a resolution. It's we submit this paper that says we reprimand Al Green because he did X, Y, Z. And then they vote on it and it's you've been reprimanded.
Okay.
Yeah. If you're trying to kick someone out of office or that kind of thing, there are other processes that typically involve the House Ethics Committee, that kind of thing.
Sure.
A vote to expel someone is also really rare and different. The only one that I can think of in recent memory is George Santos.
Okay.
Yeah. He's not gonna get expelled over this. He's just gonna get a slap on the wrist.
I think everyone can agree he's not as bad as George Santos.
It was definitely not as bad as George Santos. Yeah.
Speak for yourself.
Chris is horrified.
I'm aggrieved.
He's horrified and aggrieved. It's true. It's almost impossible to chronicle the amount of lies and falsehoods that Trump said on the stage, particularly when it related to the work of Elon Musk and the Department of Government Efficiency. He, claimed that they had cut millions in spending on transgender mice, which is not a thing. It's transgenic mice, I believe, which is a type of gene therapy, hormone therapy thing that they used to like in medical trials with mice.
Okay.
I'm not sure. I'm not a scientist, but it's definitely the government is not spending millions and millions of dollars making mice transgender. That kind of thing, like petty little things that he lied about that are almost not even worth correcting. And this speech was taking place the day after Trump launched a trade war with Mexico, Canada, and China. Mexico and Canada, the relationship with China, we know, tends to be a little more adversarial. But Mexico and China are supposed to be the United States' allies. They're this country's two biggest trade partners. Trump openly admitted in the speech that there's going to be, what phrase did he use? It was something like tough times, that there was going to be like a stabilization period on prices, basically admitting but not admitting that things were going to get more expensive for American consumers, that there's going to be economic hardship. This is also happening as they are firing tens of thousands of federal employees that, as we've discussed in previous episodes, manage and support programs that support everyday Americans, everyday working class Americans, that help provide subsidies for farmers, resources for veterans, special education programs for students with, learning disabilities, crisis centers, homeless shelters. All these things are having their funding cut, or the people that manage them are getting fired. There's more firings being planned at the Department of Veterans Affairs. Today, he's talking about eliminating the Department of Education. And you show up to Congress and give this speech where you're like, welcome to the golden age of America. Farmers, have fun with those 25% tariffs I just levied. Because that's a quote he said. He's like, to America's farmers, you're welcome, have fun. Oof. And it's like, what are we doing?
Just to rewind ever so slightly to Al Green and that, I guess, protest that he did. I want to ask both of you, do you think that was a positive thing that Al Green stood up and basically just interrupted the president and was shown out? Or do you think maybe there's a negative optic there? Do you think?
I personally think it's a worthwhile thing to do because the optic. I know what you're saying. I know how they'll try and weaponize it, but the way I see it is like Trump is so out of bounds of normality, and I think I found everything else that the Democrats are doing, which was sort of acting as if this is normal times, to just be really tepid. I'm glad that it wasn't every single Democrat. Maybe, I don't know. There's some, like, there has to be. I think that's the positive of having multiple different, members of Congress who can behave in different ways. Yeah. So personally, I'm glad to have seen him stand out like that, and I'm glad to have seen it be someone who maybe is slightly lesser known. I think if it was maybe a sort of more prominent member of like the Progressive Caucus or something like that, I think that maybe would have caused more of a backlash. But I think to see someone who's maybe a bit older doing that, it's kind of. Yeah, I personally, I don't know. Yeah, Nikki, what do you think?
I think the optics for Democrats have been shit long before Al Green decided to stand up for Medicaid. Like, the biggest criticism of Democrats right now is that they're just sitting in inaction.
Yeah.
And just, like, it's bad, we're going to do X, Y, Z, but not actually doing anything. Part of this speech is that it's almost like an act of ritual humiliation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In a way, also for Republicans. But essentially, it wasn't an actual State of the Union. It was just like a joint address to Congress, because there's a couple little like procedural requirements that make a State of the Union a State of the Union. And this was not it. But you basically, according to the rules of decorum, are forcing the two parties to come together and sit in a room, and the party that you're not a part of has to just sit there and take it while you brag about all your accomplishments and talk shit about them. What is it going to do for Democrats in one of the darkest moments of the party's history to show up and just sit there politely, when at the same time, one of the biggest current criticisms of the Trump administration, of Elon Musk's Doge project, is that they are illegally usurping the authority of Congress.
Yeah.
Like, if that's your criticism, boycott it. Say, we're not showing up to this speech until Republicans who hold both majorities in the House and the Senate make Elon Musk come sit down for testimony and hold him accountable and allow us to question him, or hold a vote to, if you want to have a Department of Government Efficiency, make it an actual department. Pass it through Congress. Like, Democrats, what they're doing right now is just letting Trump and Republicans get away with it and being like, oh, like, we're going to wear pink in solidarity with women. Women are dying. Women are, like, actually dying because of the reproductive policies of the Trump administration. The things the Supreme Court has done. Like, I don't want to see you wear pink. I want to see you annoy these people to the point where the messaging actually makes it down to voters. I want to see you actually take action.
Chris, what stood out to you watching the speech?
Well, I was actually going to bring up the Women's Democratic Caucus wearing pink. I agree with Nikki, but I also think there is power in that kind of silent, almost protest of standing out, because this was something that was watched by, I'm going to say, hundreds of millions of people. People would have watched this. I wouldn't doubt it. I think a lot of people, whether they watched the whole thing or not, have certainly seen clips.
Yeah, they've seen clips.
And I think the fact that there were people there wearing pink stands out. I don't think it was probably being covered to the point where people will necessarily understand why they were wearing pink. And Nikki's pointed it out there, but there's some research that suggests that cuts from Trump in terms of women's health could set the likes of Stanford University research into postpartum hemorrhages back by $160 million.
Yeah.
And nearly 2 of 3 maternal deaths in the US occur during the postpartum period. This is a really serious issue, which I think that should be raised and put in front of people's eyes as much as possible. And I don't, as Nikki says, I don't think that should be the only action. It has to go beyond that. But still, you know, being there and showing that you support a cause is really important. And that's something that stood out to me, because as someone who, you know, is across the pond, I didn't necessarily know about all of this or understand why they were wearing pink. But if you do a bit of research into it and you dig into actually why, there's so many serious implications in terms of Trump's cuts to that could impact women's health across America.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I think it's just, for me, the Al Green, something that active just felt like the only thing that massively cut through versus just Trump just saying, there was nothing particularly new he said. It was just hours of horrible shit. But that still makes all the headlines. Just saying egregious stuff, even though it's egregious stuff he's already said, still is what dominated. And the way the media still is just kind of seems unable to remove itself from just covering every word he says in such a way. It's just like, well, we know he says outrageous things that look kind of interesting for headlines, but now it just looks like wallpaper. Yeah. I mean, on that as well, Chris, it was fucking long. How long was it?
I think it was an hour and 39 minutes, which is the longest since records began in 45. Okay. I think it was.
I think he holds like the top 3 or 4 records for longest joint addresses to Congress.
Yeah, we know he goes off script. We know this from literally every campaign rally that lasted like 3 hours. He just waffles. Trump's first term, actually, his average, this is the biggest average ever. Can you guess what his average for State of the Union addresses were?
83 minutes.
96 minutes.
It was 1 hour 20.
Oh, I'm pretty close, though.
Yeah, I mean, you're both close. But second is Clinton, 1 hour 14 average. Okay. And then just to put it into perspective as well, Biden, throughout his term, was an average of an hour 7.
Okay.
So Trump tends to go on. So we should have expected it, really.
Nikki, did it feel more like, as well, it just didn't feel like a presidential speech as much as it perhaps should. It felt really like almost like a campaign speech. Is it just still showing that what we will see from Trump is all he's got is let's rally up the base forever and hope that they're going to be pissed off and rage out forever? Yeah. That just seems like it's all he's doing.
I think I've talked about this before, how like American presidents, have a really limited number of speeches that are like candidates for like memorable speeches of your presidency. Typically, those are the speech you give when you're made the party nominee for an election, like after the DNC or the RNC, the speech you give at your inauguration, speech you give the night you win, and like the State of the Union. The State of the Union is like the one speech a year that the president, like I said, gets a chance to sit down, all the members of Congress, have like every major camera in the country, like news stations, streamers, like C-SPAN, like every major news outlet is there covering it, and lay out what he's done, what he wants to do, how great he is as a president, his like vision, what he wants to do next, and how shitty the other party is. There's a lot of effort that goes into planning the minutia of these speeches because they're supposed to be the most memorable sort of tone-setting speeches of an administration. And you can just tell that Trump is kind of sick of this shit. Like, by minute 30-ish, he was over it. He had just switched back into, like, campaign ramble mode. He has this, like, Rolodex in his brain of culture war topics and, like, greatest hits that the moment he, like, checks out, he just starts pulling from them. And he can keep going and going and going as long as he wants. But it's not interesting. It's not anything anyone, like, hasn't heard before at this point. And it might be wishful thinking, but it almost feels like at this point, it rings really hollow, especially when you have Republicans, like the Republican National Campaign Committee, advising Republican lawmakers to stop holding town halls because they keep getting confronted by angry constituents who are pissed off about what Trump is doing with Doge, what he's doing to veterans. Like, it really just felt like a farcical, theatrical hour and 30 minutes that the country was forced to sit through.
I suppose with Trump, he's set the tone so much, so broadly anyway. I guess it's maybe these speeches, they're just not as necessary for him as they have been for other presidents too. So that's why he's going to just not focus so much on it. Going on to a couple of specific moments. So these are ones we thought you kind of have to hear to believe. So one being this new level of self-obsession when Trump was discussing revenge porn legislation coming into force.
And thank you to John Thune and the Senate. Great job. To criminalize the publication of such images online is terrible, terrible thing. And once it passes the House, I look forward to signing that bill into law. Thank you. And I'm going to use that bill for myself, too, if you don't mind. Because nobody gets treated worse than I do online. Nobody.
Nikki, this kind of started out so well, didn't it? You know, it's legislation that realistically, I think bipartisanly, everyone is going to get behind it. Why do they feel the need to quip and joke in this way about everything? Or is it just that, he really doesn't take anything that's good for anyone seriously?
I think that was like his impulse of making everything about himself jumping out, because he also, like, we were talking just now about those moments where he'll like the president will point to people in the audience and be like, oh, this person went to fight in Iraq and lost their leg, or this person XYZ. One of the people Trump shouted out was a young woman who had been the victim of like AI generated revenge porn. And it was like, they pan the cameras to her and there's applause lines and it's like, oh, you're so brave for speaking up. And this is a really horrible thing that happened to you. And then the president goes, yes, but they treat me worse. It's like, no, brother. There are 1,000, a million, a billion worse things that happen on the internet than people saying not nice things about you on Twitter or news outlets that you don't like criticizing your administration.
Yeah, it really, really gross level of self-obsession and delusion there. In more delusion news as well. So he gave Musk a name check really early on, which we want to get into. But he then also said this.
It's very simple. and the days of rule by unelected bureaucrats are over.
The laugh there, Nikki, really does say it all, doesn't it? The days of unelected bureaucrats really aren't over, are they?
No, they're actually probably worse than ever.
Yeah, the going's good for unelected bureaucrats.
Yeah, the going's great for unelected bureaucrats, especially if they own like multi-billion-dollar companies that takes federal contracts.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I was talking to my friend Jordan Newell, who we're trying to get on the podcast. I did an interview with him yesterday.
Come on the podcast.
God, Jordan.
Yeah, Jordan, come on the pod. Jordan and I were talking about this, how Elon Musk is literally just a random dude who has been given like a little loophole job in the White House and all of a sudden has almost more effective authority than the president on a bunch of this stuff.
Yeah.
Definitely more authority than any cabinet member.
How significant do you think it was how much Trump zoned in on Musk in terms of, one, the practicalities of how much he clearly wants him to enact power over the government, but also, is it going to be consequential, as you say, down the line? Has he just kind of, is one significant thing that he's fucked himself legally a little bit here?
Yeah, I mean, I think we talked about it like 1 or 2 episodes ago, how I think Elon Musk right now, I don't think I'd call, he is an idiot in some ways, but I don't think like holistically I can outright call him an idiot, because you have to have like some semblance of a working brain to do some of the things he's doing, particularly, you know, hijacking federal contracts from other companies requires some semblance of a plan.
Yeah, you need a brain for ketamine to have any effect as well.
Exactly.
So-
If you don't have a brain, you don't feel the high.
Exactly.
Elon Musk is, in a way, a useful idiot. He loves the attention. He loves the sparkle of, oh, I am the Doge Master. I am Dark MAGA. And it's convenient for Republicans because Elon Musk will be the executioner of all these agenda items that they wanted to accomplish, not just during Trump's first term, but for years in memoriam. For example, like eliminating the Department of Education, which is apparently the next thing they want to do. But at the same time, Musk is going to be a really convenient fall guy when the economic consequences of all this bullshit start to hit, when Republicans start feeling the voter backlash because people in their districts are losing jobs, are not able to pay their rent for their families because grocery prices go up. They're going to have to, you know, lop off some heads. And the more Trump and his cabinet members and other Republicans can point the finger and be like, oh, look at all this work Elon Musk is doing. Look at all these things Elon Musk is doing. Aren't all these things great? The moment they stop being great, Elon Musk can easily become the target to be like, actually, we're kicking him out of the picture. We're getting him gone. He will have walked off with millions, billions of dollars when that happens. He's going to get the greatest golden parachute there ever was out of the federal government. But my hope is that he's the fall guy.
I'd love to have millions of billions.
It would be nice.
It'd be really nice, wouldn't it?
Just millions, really.
I don't know if it's going to be millions of billions. That
Millions
was,
of
that was more
billions
me
of
combining.
billions. What about millions of billions of trillions?
They've got rats big as cats.
Rats and cats is-
That's a big rat.
I know, really.
Local
is.
journalism.
Yeah, so there's a question here from one of our patrons, Gabby. So if you want us to have millions and billions, do go to patreon.com/American Friction. And if you could give us a million or so, that'd be really nice.
Trillion.
I promise I will use it all responsibly.
You don't have to give us that much. In fact, from £5 a month, I don't know what that is in dollars, you'll get access to our chat community where you can ask questions such as this. So this is from Gabby.
And receive subscriber exclusive Yoda content.
Exactly. There's all of that. So this is a question from Gabby here. I think we can all agree that the disorganized, weak source response to the speech by the Dems was not the way to do it. If y'all were head of the Democratic Party, what would you have organized the senators/Congress people to do? Nikki, yeah, what would you have? There's this organization of other than wearing pink or the parade, it's disjointed. What would you have had them do in a unionized block of some kind?
I would probably have selected like a delegation of 10, 15 Democrats, ideally in like competitive districts or, red states. And I would have sent them out to homeless shelters, women's crisis shelters, abortion clinics. And basically, either throughout the day or like during the fake State of the Union, have them hold press conferences or give interviews, like something with these people, and either air them at the same time, do like a social media blitz at the same time, because TV stations, the news is going to be covering the speech. Mm-hmm. But just have a media plan to have Democratic lawmakers meet with people who are actually being affected by the current policies of the Trump administration, to put a spotlight on the people who are losing their jobs, who are losing their benefits, who can't access reproductive rights. Talk to them and put them front and center. So while Trump is, in the Capitol talking about the golden age of America, Democrats are putting a farmer on television who is talking about how he may not be able to keep his operation going, to keep producing, to feed his family, because these tariffs are going to jack up prices and he might not be able to sell his crop. That kind of thing. That's what I would have had Democrats doing. Like, color coordinating is cute, but at this point, you're already in a public relations crisis. Like, Democrats are in the shithole right now.
Yeah.
And they need to go like bigger and badder, because Republicans are not going to give them a gold star for good behavior.
So one thing from me that I was thinking on this, I noticed a few people did boycott it. I think AOC boycotted it, and she was posting instead around it. Sort of, she was doing her own sort of media thing rather than being there. My thought and on this was like, what if I just suggested they all just didn't go? It doesn't deserve the respect of being there. What do you think on that, Nikki? Am I being naive to suggest that? Is there some reason not to? But I just think, fuck it. He was just talking absolute nonsense. He's disrespectful, and he clearly doesn't want to work with them in any way. He has no respect. So why show him the respect of allowing this to be the thing? Like, if you wanted something optical, there being absolutely no one on the Democratic side, there's a downside to that, but at the same time, it's kind of showing, screw this guy. We don't agree with what he's doing.
No, exactly. If Democrats had skipped the speech and just gone on a national anti-Doge media tour, I think that would have been a million times more effective.
Chris, any suggestions?
I kind of agree with Nikki. Well, I totally agree with Nikki. I think the issue is, and we've spoken about it loads of times, is that it seems like the Democratic Party doesn't really have an engine room to make this happen, and that's why things like this aren't happening. I don't really know who controls what the messaging is that comes from the Democratic Party at the moment, and I think that's why there was a lack of pushback, I guess. A lack of any kind of opposing what the messaging from Trump is. And as Nikki says, the cuts and the executive orders, the damage that this is doing to ordinary Americans right across the country. It's hard to see how a Democratic Party in that situation can pull together to do the things that Nikki suggests are needed. So I think before anything, it just needs to sort itself out.
Yeah, there's this whole, as well, maybe the institutional mindedness of the Democratic Party as well, of this going, well, come on, guys, we've all got a job to do, so we best show up. And I just think a little bit like, well, you do have a job to do, and sitting here and just being berated by Donald Trump isn't doing that. So stop keeping up appearances in this ridiculous way. So, Gabby, there are our thoughts on that one there. This trade war, Nikki, just looping back to that. How much is this harming America itself? And is Trump basically sparking a recession?
Trade war. Yeah, so there's going to be some things that will take longer for Americans to feel like the economic pain of if this trade war continues. We saw that it kind of went into effect on Tuesday, the 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico 10%, 15% tariffs on several select goods from China. Auto manufacturer, I think like the CEOs of the big three auto manufacturing companies probably call Trump and were like, "You're fucking insane." So they gave them those three like major companies a 1-month extension because some car parts cross the borders between the U.S. and Canada, the U.S. and Mexico, like 6 times before the car is finished. It's a whole thing. But you have companies like Target who are saying like, "Hey, we get a ton of our produce from Mexico." And like, think of how long a banana stays fresh. A couple days. So if places like Target, other major grocers who get a lot of their stuff from Mexico, within a week or two, that produce, which is operating under a tariff now, you're going to see prices start being jacked up. There's going to be some things where it's going to take a little longer to feel the economic pain, but grocery bills, those could start going up in days.
Yeah.
And, it's not like people are suddenly going to get paid more. Wages aren't changing to match. And then you have to consider inflationary pressures. I think the Wall Street Journal, a, classically conservative publication that really loves the economy, I think called it one of Trump's like dumbest ideas ever. And I agree. I agree with the Wall Street Journal at this point. It's idiotic, and all it's going to do is hurt Americans. And Trump and his like economic advisors and Elon Musk, they're all on this page. It's like, oh, like, there's going to be a little bit of economic pain for a little while, like a little nice transition period, but just like bear with us.
It really reminds me of the kind of Brexit mindset over here as well. It's that these, it's usually men, and they're rich right-wing men, and they say, "Don't worry, there's good stuff coming.
Yeah.
You just got to suck it up for a little bit." And then the good stuff doesn't necessarily come, and also they haven't had to suck up shit. Because it doesn't matter to you.
Terrible turn
That's
of
right.
phrase.
Suck it up.
My goodness.
Yeah, human centipede.
It's normally Nikki doing that.
But they haven't had to do, they haven't had to do anything, because bananas could get like 1 billion times more expensive. Maybe not that much more expensive, but a lot more expensive. And Elon Musk doesn't know or care. He doesn't care if it doubles in price. Things to him which are just nothing. Whereas, as you say, normal people, it would impact more. Chris, just a quick VAR, actually, because you're our stats guy. Bananas, how long do you reckon they last? Because I think more than Nikki's saying.
Well, some people put them in the fridge, don't they?
I've done
some
that.
people put them
I
in
was
the fridge.
literally just looking up the like apple in the refrigerator thing.
One thing I didn't expect to come from this podcast was fruit and veg disinformation.
Yeah, that's disappointing.
I reckon in the fridge it lasts maybe... fresh. Upwards. No, a week.
A week.
I'm going to say a week.
Yeah. Nikki and
I reckon producer Simon knows about this. He looks like a guy who puts his bananas in the fridge.
I do not.
Oh.
Okay.
They still last longer than 2 days, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, cool. They do last longer than 2 days.
I'm glad we've cleared this up.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, listeners, that Nikki went a bit QAnon about bananas there.
Yeah.
It's strange. But Chris, come on then, on the economy, some of the biggest consequences that you've noted in your research.
Well, Nikki's pretty much said most of the things that need to be said there, but the thing that hasn't been mentioned is in terms of what this means for the relationship with the US and China. We spoke to Isaac Stonefish a couple of episodes ago, who basically said that China's prepared for tariffs. It will be minimal in terms of the impact that these tariffs will have upon China. A lot of what it actually serves to do is just increase tensions between the two nations. And we've seen some response from China already. The latest line being, if the US truly wants to solve the fentanyl issue, then the right thing to do is to consult with China by treating each other as equals. If war is what the US wants, be it a tariff war, a trade war, or any other type of war, we're ready to fight till the end. That's a pretty...
It's pretty bold.
It's a pretty punchy statement. Yeah. And that is something that everyone, not just Americans, everyone in the world should be concerned about, because you don't need me to tell you, a war, no matter what is used, whether it's a cyber war, a trade war, or a military war, is going to have massive consequences for the entire world.
On the polling side, Chris, it's time to get back into that, get into the groove. So Trump's always polled quite well on the economy, but is he still? What's going on there?
Well, he was polling better than Biden pre-election. People thought that he would do a better job, essentially, but that's starting to change now. Brookings compiled some polling of Trump and the economy, and they found this. In CNN's 2024 exit poll, Trump had a 53% to 46% advantage to handling the economy. In the recent Washington Post Ipsos poll, 53% disapproved of his economic stewardship, which is similar to a 54% disapproval measure in Gallup's early February survey. So I think it's fair to say that people in the surveys that have been conducted already in the first month of Trump's presidency, or Trump 2.0, people are starting to look on his economic ability less favorably, it seems.
Good. Nikki, on a wider point, obviously the last episode you and I did, we were speaking around that meeting in the White House, Zelensky and Trump. Yeah. Just the continued fallout from that still seems to be, you know, the biggest story in the world from our perspective. Looking in the news, it seems to be what most people are still discussing. What is stateside? What's the feeling around that situation?
I think the general attitude Americans take toward Ukraine is reflective of a larger attitude the U.S. has toward like military conflict abroad in general. In one of our really early episodes, I think I talked about it, how the United States, the two last major domestic attacks on the U.S. were like Pearl Harbor and 9/11. Americans were used to sending our armies abroad for lengthy wars that, you know, we stopped feeling at home within a couple of years. I mean, the quote unquote war on terror officially lasted like 20 years. Some could argue that in some ways it's still ongoing. We still have like troops in the Middle East, although in a much more reduced capacity. And I think over time, Americans after time grew frustrated with this idea that we were sending soldiers abroad to die in pointless wars that we weren't going to win. Same thing in Vietnam. And I think that kind of attitude, in some aspects, has been shifted on to Ukraine and the war against Russia. There's, you know, a lot of distance now between Americans and the Cold War. People who lived through the Cold War tend to be a lot older nowadays. Most Americans were not young and spry during the fall of the Soviet Union. To them at this point, we've lived in a period where the U.S. has been the central axis of international relations, of global like military dominance. We were the big guy. We were the dude. What we say goes. And very like it's a very privileged position to be in as a nation. We haven't had domestic like military conflict. To a lot of Americans, the idea of intervening in a war where we're not an actual military party. Well, in a way, I can also, I kind of get that side of the argument. I see where a lot of these people who oppose intervention in Ukraine are coming from. A ton of our budget goes to like the support of our military, the support of other militaries. But I think the thing that people miss is that Putin does represent a very real risk to Europe, who are some of our most important allies. That this idea that the U.S. is the dominant economic, political, and military force in the world is not something that's self-sustainable. If you want to stay that way as a country, you have to invest in it. You have to protect the like little country that might not necessarily be a big deal to you, but is the first step in the hostile foreign powers' larger project of influence within their own sphere. So I think while people in Europe, where you guys are, might be really freaked out about this because this has huge implications for the continent if Putin is just allowed to like run into Ukraine, take half of their territory, and the US is like, you know what? Congratulations. It's a lovely piece of real estate. Like that has huge implications for you guys. It gives Putin and the Russian government, the Kremlin, a lot of confidence if they ever want to go through Poland or some other shit. Well, whereas the US, their attitude is kind of like, you know, it's just a rinky-dink country in Europe. Like, what does that matter to me? And the latest updates I can give on the situation is that Zelensky is holding crisis meetings with members of the EU and European leaders because now the US is pretty solidified as an unreliable ally to Ukraine.
Nikki, a final question then, just to wrap up this section on Trump. Are Trump supporters weirdly getting exactly what they want and the opposite of what they want at the same time?
Yeah, it's definitely the meme, like, I didn't think the leopards would eat my face.
Yeah.
When I talk about Republicans being confronted by angry constituents in their districts, they're getting confronted by a lot of Republican Trump voters who are saying, like, you weren't supposed to do this to me.
Yeah.
You were supposed to do this to other people. You were supposed to attack the immigrants and the trans people and, you know, get rid of DEI. You weren't supposed to, like, fire me from my job as a federal worker. You weren't supposed to cut off my benefits.
It's the whole hardship thing again, isn't it? Is that people go, oh, okay, cool, yeah, there's going to be some bad stuff, but that won't be me who gets the bad stuff. Like, no one's actually prepared to take the bad stuff themselves. So, yeah, what a strange time we live in. So we're going to get straight into our listener questions, and our listener questions, as we have mentioned before, come through our Patreon generally. So if you sign up on Patreon, patreon.com/American Friction, on the £5 tier and above, we have a community chat where we're always in there. We're sharing pictures of Nikki's cat in there, and we're talking about politics too. And me and Chris are offering to talk about Leicester. But no one wants to talk.
No one's asked about it.
No one wants to talk about it.
No one wants to talk about Leicester, I suppose.
The football team, that is.
Yeah.
Not the city.
Oh,
no one wants to talk about.
I'll talk about either. But anyway, and
chat.
just as an update, if you haven't listened for a few weeks, so we used to have an interview section here in the show, but we wanted to give ourselves a little bit more breathing space for us to chat a little bit more. So now our interviews are coming out on Mondays. So main show on Fridays, interview on Mondays. Listen to all of it. Anyway, listener questions then. This is from Edith Haas. Question on Trump's plan to control the White House press pool. Is this going to have much impact on news dissemination given, one, the partisan nature of news media in the US, and two, the shift away from traditional sources/modes of news dissemination? Or is this more a performative way of showing power that reflects the propaganda machines of 20th century autocrats and dictators, not so much in effectiveness, but in how it shows might? Nikki, what do you think on this?
I would say it's not either or. It's a little bit of both.
Okay.
For listeners who don't know, there are several layers of how people cover this government. You have to get credentialed for different things. So for example, I'm credentialed as a reporter in the Capitol. So I can report on the House and the Senate. I can go into like the chambers, the press galleries. I can, chase lawmakers around the Capitol, and I have my little press badge. There's a separate process to get credentialed for the White House. And there's a big group of people who are White House press correspondents who, cover the White House, are credentialed to go into the White House. They might be in the press briefing room. They might hang out outside. There are spaces in the White House that are quite small. Things like the Oval Office, or not necessarily even the White House, but something like Air Force One, where you can't cram, several dozen journalists into the space or like 100 journalists into the space and have it be like an effective form of coverage. So what happens is that there's this thing called like the White House press pool, which is a smaller subset of all these credentialed reporters who get sort of more intimate access to the president's office, to sort of those spaces that are typically like more closed off to press on a rotating basis. It's not the same group of people every time. And historically, the group that has decided what reporters, what outlets are included in this like press pool is the White House Correspondents Association, which is an independent group of journalists. They elect their leaders every couple years, and on a rotating basis, they kind of figure out a schedule for who's going to be in there. And the reason this was created was because under President Woodrow Wilson, there was this rumor that was eventually proven to be untrue that Wilson was going to start kind of like hand selecting what journalists could cover him at his press conferences. And the idea was that it's a really bad principle to set in terms of like freedom of the press to have lawmakers decide who gets to cover them. Like, it's one thing for a president or his office to decide who he sits down with for like a one-on-one interview. But it's a whole other thing for the president to say, like, I get to decide who and what has access to sort of the open coverage of me in the White House. So they created this independent organization that would decide, like, ideally reputable outlets, wires that would, you know, be involved in the press pool, that would be involved in like covering the Oval Office, that kind of thing. And what essentially the Trump administration is doing is saying, White House Correspondents Association, you're not in charge of that. We're going to decide who's in the press pool. And it's exactly what the White House Correspondents Association was created to avoid. And we've seen already the AP has been kicked, the Associated Press has been kicked out of the press pool. They're not allowed in the Oval Office. The Associated Press is one of the most important news wires in the world.
Yeah.
And the thing here, the AP wasn't barred because they made some like great faux pas, like some egregious error in a news article that like completely destroyed their reputation. They did it because Trump got mad that the Associated Press, an international news wire, said they weren't going to call the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America.
Sure.
And so what the Trump administration is doing is, like our listener said, this sort of authoritarian showboating of like, I control the press outlets, but also they're now deciding who gets added into the press pool. And I think we've seen some pretty disreputable ultra right-wing outlets get included in the pool. For example, like OAN and Brian Glenn, like the guy who asked Zelensky why he wasn't wearing a suit during the Oval Office meeting, like he's now being allowed in the press pool, like OAN being an explicitly pro-Trump propaganda station.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit of both. It's a little bit of both. And it's bad. It's bad when you're setting the precedent that lawmakers get to like punish the press for unfavorable coverage.
Chris, would you say it's a bit of a display of dominance politics? Which you like talking about?
In a way.
Yeah.
I guess the whole Trump 2.0 is a display of dominance politics, as I've mentioned before.
Nice, good.
Yeah.
Say it again, though.
Dominance politics.
Dominance politics, yeah.
You struggled with that then, didn't you?
Fuck, I was taking the piss out of Chris
Yeah,
and then...
that serves you bloody right.
Karma for me there. But yeah, dominance politics is what it is. I hope that answers your question, Edith.
Haven't Reuters been chucked out as well?
Ooh.
Of the press pool, because there was uproar around that TASS reporter, the Russian state-funded media, snuck into that White House meeting between Zelensky
Which
and
is
Trump.
insane.
Yeah.
Insane.
The fact, well, to begin with, they snuck in and they were chucked out, but the fact that they were anywhere close to that meeting in the first place and Reuters wasn't is
Reuters,
an absolute shambles.
Yeah.
They were barred from the cabinet meeting that took place last week. Yeah.
Ridiculous.
Another question here from Matt GS, and he's been a bit cheeky here. He's got two in, but I'm letting him.
Oh, okay.
I'm letting him.
We'll allow it.
Yeah, well, I'll allow it. So Matt GS asks, does the AF team, love that, want to take any bets on what Elon will do to finally put the nail in the coffin of his relationship with Trump? And what might make enough Republicans speak up against him? Chris, I'm actually going to go to you first.
I don't know.
No.
I don't know. I think Trump will just get sick of his personality eventually. I also think Musk will probably get too big for his boots. think that he has more power than, well, he already has a lot of power as an unelected official as it is. But I think maybe because he has so much power in terms of federal contracts, he may overstep the mark, in which case Trump might be forced to then cut ties with him. It's really hard to read the future, actually. But I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, basically. But I think I don't see a world where Trump goes this whole administration at the side of Musk. What do you think?
For me, I think with the question, I would maybe turn it on its head a little bit. It's like, I don't really necessarily think it's to do with anything that Elon Musk will do that'll sort of drive it. Because I don't think he's necessarily the driver of his own fate in this situation. I mean, he's got a horrible personality. He's annoying to be around. He's stepped across the line multiple times. Trump will get rid of him if it seems useful to get rid of him, and he'll keep him around whilst it seems useful to have him around. As Nikki was saying earlier, if there comes a point where having a fall guy is useful, then he'll get rid of Musk. But also, I could see him having Musk around the whole time, because if just having someone who will ruthlessly do things you want and is prepared to take that much flack for just being a horrible person, that's quite useful to you. So I could see him just sort of lingering around, because he's gone so far already. But then on the flip side, if there were to be something that's like a coin flip, make Trump change his mind, it'll be something really stupid, like a post on Twitter that will just make Trump sort of feel slighted, because he's got a very fragile ego.
My gut feeling is that it will be something optic. It will be something that Musk does that Trump has to then cut ties with him because of the way that it makes Trump look also. Yeah. I think that's my gut feeling on it anyway.
We have breaking news.
Oh, okay.
Oh, no.
Nice. Breaking news on the pod.
Not
What is
mid-pod.
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 This is from the BBC. Trump suspends tariffs on most Mexican goods until April 2nd after talks with country's president.
Okay, so he's kind of wimping out on some of the tariff stuff then. Is Trump here, I don't know, trying to shift the Overton window a bit, but then showing that he's prepared to back down if he can get just something slightly more favorable for the US? He doesn't need to get everything he wants.
The thing is, Trump he does this kind of thing. It's like a type of brinksmanship where he's like, I'm going to do this horrible thing to you unless you agree to do this thing that I want. And a lot of countries will typically do the thing that he wants. But here, it looks much more like Trump was like, I'm going to do this. And, they're going to give me all these concessions on the fentanyl crisis. Like, what does Canada have to do with the fentanyl crisis? But it kind of just looked like probably CEOs and the heads of major corporations were like, you're going to collapse the economy and completely fuck up our shit if you don't pull back on this. And Trump was seemingly forced to retreat because Canada had already leveled retaliatory sanctions. I think the tariffs against them are still in effect. Mexico was not going to announce the retaliatory tariffs until Sunday. So it kind of just seems like he was cowed by the potential of economic disaster, which is still on the table.
Yeah.
Retaliatory tariff. It's not easy to say that, is it?
Easy for you to say.
Retaliatory. Nope, not there.
Wow.
How did you do that in one take?
Retaliatory tariffs?
God damn it.
Retaliatory tariffs. Well, though the second part of Matt GS's question here, how about a sweepstake on how much longer Elon Musk lasts? So we kind of all hedged it there, but what do we think? I'm going to go first. I think he lasts the term.
Musk?
Yep. I think he sets in. I think he's a cockroach. He's got a shitload of money. I think they're tied to each other. And I think he's doing stuff which Trump kind of wants him to do. And I think he can be a fall guy without being the fall guy. I'm going to be wrong, and it'll be like next week's show will be Elon Musk has been fired. But that's my broad logic on it.
I don't think it'll be next week, but I think... Well, as I say, it's hard to read the future.
It is.
Some might say impossible.
Oh.
I give it a year.
A year?
I think a lot of it depends on what the fallout is from a lot of these federal cuts and how much damage it actually does and what it means to public opinion. Because we've already seen public opinion for Musk go down pretty spectacularly, it's also falling for Donald Trump as well. He has a really bad approval rating for a president in the first month, as we mentioned on last week's episode. So yeah, I
wonder on that, though, it depends on how much Trump thinks he can run for re-election or not. And if he actually has the sense to think that he can't, he doesn't give a shit about the Republican Party having power if it's not his thing. So I do just wonder, will he just use this presidency to get, it's a kind of like a money grab scheme. And I don't know if he's actually thinking about what he sees the state of the country or people or the politics at the end of his term are. I think he just wants to get as much stuff for him and his mates as he can, and that might be the case. So again, it's hard to read the future. Nikki, what did you actually go for a year? So I've gone for the whole term. You've gone for a year.
Yeah, why not?
Nikki.
I think I'm kind of aligned with Chris. I definitely think he's out by the midterms. I don't think he'll last more than a year. And curveball that we haven't talked about, he has companies to run. And those companies, I don't know if you looked at Tesla's stock price.
Yeah, it's looking bad.
In recent months, it's not looking good. I think basically the time period of the Trump administrations has erased most of the market gains that Tesla stock price made year to date. And if things keep going this way, one would expect it to decline or continue declining. So I also think at a certain point, there's going to be pressure from his companies to quit this bullshit. Either find a replacement CEO to help us run shit on the day to day if you're going to be doing weird fake but also disastrously real government stuff, or there's going to be pressure for him to come back into the fold. I also think there's an added aspect here that he knows that what he's doing with these federal contracts that he's giving or trying to give to SpaceX, the mysterious the US military is going to purchase thousands and thousands of Tesla trucks. Those kinds of things, him trying or pushing to move SpaceX's contract with the International Space Station to 2028, 2026 rather than 2030. Those are all efforts by him to make sure he gets as much money as he can right now and not have to wait until he pisses off this administration and any future administration so much that he'll never get a federal contract again. I see signs that he's also looking for the out and making sure he's ready for it.
Well, with that brings us to the end of this episode of American Friction.
I hate the way you said that. That was not nice.
Yeah, I knew I was going to say
that. That sounded
weirdly.
like Trump then.
That brings us to the end of this episode of American Friction. Said it with much more conviction there. So, Nikki, thank you very much.
My pleasure, my brothers.
And I wasn't being sarcastic there. That's just my voice.
Sounded it.
Chris, thanks.
Cheers, mate. Yeah,
Thanks, Chris.
I suppose, aggrieved Chris says thanks, I
guess.
guess.
Thanks for nothing.
And thanks to you, Jarv, Chris.
Yeah, thank you, Jarv, Chris. And thank you, Simon, as always. Thanks, you.
Simon.
And retaliatory tariffs to you too.
Oh, thank you.
It wasn't totally there, though, was it?
Oh, come on. That was pretty good.
That wasn't bang on.
It was all right.
I took a risk.
I think you did great, Simon.
It was better than mine. Let's be honest. Retaliatory. Nope.
No, he's not got it.
Retaliatory.
So as we come to the end of the show, another quick reminder that if you do enjoy what we do, you can support us on Patreon. It really would mean a lot. That's where those questions were from, and you can ask them if you sign up for the £5 and above tiers. So search American Friction Podcast Patreon or go to patreon.com/American Friction directly to sign up. There's the link in the show notes. We really do want to keep going forever, but we need your help to do that. So a quick reminder as well, if you enjoy what we do, but you can't support us financially, we get that, but please go rate and review the show wherever you're listening. You've been listening to American Friction. Make sure you keep listening forever. Goodbye. But actually, before we say goodbye, finally, a reminder, we're on Spotify on video now, and I've got a new friend to introduce on that, so she might not like this, because she's
not going to like this at all. Nope.
I'm sorry, babe.
She's retaliatory. Damn it.
This is Cheese. Welcome to
Hi,
American
Cheese.
Friction, Cheese. And everyone, so, you've got Yoda
not
to
a real
support,
dog.
you've got Cheese as well, so keep her in kibble and go to patreon.com/American Friction to sign up. You've been listening to American Friction. Goodbye.
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 Woof.